Good evening, sports fans from all around the globe. I am your host today, Jeff Dawson, East Coast Sports Investors, and this is our weekly, my favorite time of the week, with Brady Kannon, as we break down this week's PGA Tour. A little different format this week, as we got doubles teams. I don't know what exactly how Brady will explain this, but some great golfers up top. The favorites, Xander and Patrick Cantlay, plus 300 on DraftKings right now. It's not a big bang for that buck. Maybe try to go further down the board, but listen, I'm just sitting here. I am just staring the rudder. This is where Brady comes in. Last week, extra golf. Matthew Fitzpatrick, Jordan Spieth, and Mr. Fitzpatrick comes and wins last week's tournament. And this week we're going to partners, pairs, doubles, teams, however we want to word it. But without further ado, let's bring the star of this show in, the one and only Mr. Brady Kannon.
Well, thank you so much for having me once again, Jeff. Good to be back with you on a Wednesday evening. And yeah, I didn't expect Fitzpatrick was showing some signs early in the year. He had some neck problems. His neck was giving him some pain, a pain in the neck, indeed, for Matthew Fitzpatrick. But then he finished top 10 at the Masters. And Jordan Spieth, of course, was in the thick of it with that great round in the pairing with Phil Mickelson on Sunday. And Fitzpatrick wasn't really on my radar, but I definitely missed on Jordan Spieth. He came right out and said he was exhausted. And I thought the Masters hangover would be real for Jordan Spieth. I thought there was going to be a fatigue factor, but boy, he didn't show really any signs at all. He got out of the gate a little bit slow on Thursday, but just kept getting better every single day, and obviously was right there until the bitter end, and really kind of a hard luck loser. Lipped out you can't hit a putt much closer without going in than what Jordan Spieth did a couple of times late in the game and in the playoff. But then Matthew Fitzpatrick, you got to credit him as well. What an iron shot on the third playoff hole to about a foot to win the golf tournament. So you and I talked about it last week. I love Harbor Town. I played that course. I love the course. I love the tournament. I love seeing these guys have to work their ball in both directions, and a fun one to watch that certainly delivered a very entertaining result.
I have to be an open book because we do our show live, unscripted here. And then on Wednesday, I go over and I go do my final selections for my one and done in the Patrick Mayo and the Rick Gaiman's tournaments there. And I can't tell a lie. I had Jordan in on the Mayo one, and the fatigue. I kept hearing fatigue and fatigue and fatigue. And so I pulled him out. I think I ended up with Finau, Kuchar, or something to that effect. But long story short, as this tournament was progressing, as you said, Jordan seemed to get stronger and stronger. And I'm like, don't worry, the fatigue's going to step in. But as you said, hats off. He played an amazing tournament.
No, you're absolutely right. And I thought eventually that it was going to catch up to him. And you can understand, you come off of the Masters and he comes out that first day, shoots a decent round, and maybe that one was kind of running on fumes and adrenaline, but you felt eventually, I did anyway, that it was going to drop off and he was going to have a one ugly round that took him out of it, but it never happened. And, gosh, credit to the young man, obviously in pretty darn good shape and really playing some tremendous golf right now.
So we don't have the beautiful red checkered hat that you had last week for Harbor Town on this week. How do we go from the Masters to Harbor Town to this week? How does the Joe public look at this tournament, and how can we get involved in something like it's a different mindset, I would assume.
Yeah, it's really kind of the second change up that the PGA Tour has thrown us, or what they do each and every year throughout the schedule. It started with the WGC match play. Of course, that is not a traditional stroke play event. And here about a month or so later, We have the Zurich Classic of New Orleans. Some awful good cities we've visited lately: Augusta, Georgia, and then Hilton Head Island, South Carolina, and on to NOLA. The Big Easy ought to be fun time down there. And I think that's part of the vibe that this tournament is kind of leaning on as well. It used to be a traditional stroke play event, but in 2017, they converted it to a two-person team event. There are 160 golfers in the field, making up 80 two-person teams. And I think there's a little bit of a friendly vibe and maybe a little bit relaxed. And, it's certainly not a major, and it's not even Harbor Town. I think it's yet another level below that. And you get a lot of college teammates pairing up, or college friends teaming up. You get a lot of fellow countrymen teaming up, or just otherwise good friends on the tour that will pair up. And I think they enjoy that. And I think they also enjoy a little bit of a change to the routine, the week-to-week stroke play events that we're used to. And I think as viewers, I know I kind of enjoy it as well. It's something different. I tell you, as far as a handicapper or a sports bettor, I don't necessarily enjoy it because it's more of a guessing game. And, you asked the question, how can the public get involved? I would warn people, take this one easy this week and dumb down your risk a little bit. And I said the same, or I gave the same advice prior to the WGC match play, because it's not the way all of our models and stats and, everything that we look at in a week-to-week handicap, they're not necessarily built for something like this. We have two-person teams, so week to week, we are trying to isolate an individual golfer and looking at their skill sets and how they might match up for this golf course, reading the market. Does the price fit? We're doing all those things that we do. And now we're adding a second person to the fold. I related it earlier this week, Jeff, to like if you put together, let's say the Philadelphia Eagles and the Pittsburgh Steelers were going to combine forces and they were going to take on the Buffalo Bills and the Baltimore Ravens. It's probably easier to assign a power rating to those two football teams combined than it is to two golfers, an individual sport combined. So, for instance, we know Kurt Kitayama can do this, but now you throw in Taylor Montgomery as his partner, and how are they going to? We're trying to take a dynamic, a two-person dynamic, and ask ourselves how it's going to perform as a singular entity. It's tough. So, again, it's a little bit more of a guessing game this week. Now, the field is not all that stacked. You do have the cream at the top, and there's a huge gap after that. You kind of go into some mid-range players and some tour journeymen after that. And then towards the bottom of the board, it's a lot of very unknown players that a lot of people have probably never heard of, except for John Daly and David Duval are a team in this field. How about that? That ought to be fun, at least, to watch those guys. A couple of my favorite guys when they were in the prime of their careers. But, again, to go along with the vibe of New Orleans and what a fun city that is, I think this is kind of geared to be a fun event where the guys team up and camaraderie is in play. But as far as a betting standpoint, we're certainly going to make some plays. We want to be in action, but I would take it a little easier this week than normal.
My claim to fame is way back in the day when Greg Norman, Willow Bend, right down the road from me, private country club. They would fly Greg in and they would do a pro-am there, sponsored by Reebok and his wine and some big time former athletes, the Roger Clemens of the world, the Emmett Smiths. They would all come in, and John Daly and Robert Gomez was playing with Tim Wakefield. I caddied for Tim Wakefield back-to-back years. And but after during the tournament, there was a cranberry bog, and John pulled out a Poland Spring water bottle, and then he put the ball on top of it, and he proceeded to drive it over this cranberry bog, which no one was doing. They were going up and around. He said, "The hell with that! I'm going to hit it over." But I then went to a restaurant owned by Jay Miller, former Bruin, the Courtyard, and we partied with John Daly. He played some music, and so I have some great fond memories of Mr. Daly.
It's very cool. Good story there. Yeah, I thought it was, Last year, Jay Haas and his son Bill Haas were a pairing in this tournament, and they actually did quite well. I believe they made the cut. So I think it's fun that you have, a little blast from the past there, certainly with David Duval and John Daly, both major champions. And, then we've got the usuals as well. Like I say, a lot of tour journeymen and some big names at the top. And again, a change up to the normal routine, I think, is good. And it kind of alleviates the grind a little bit. And I'm going to enjoy watching it. And hopefully we can land on a few winners.
The last question I have before I turn it over to you, like in the Ryder Cup, best ball, alternating shots and stuff like that, is that like this, or each man for himself, best score, or how does this work?
Right. Very good question. On Thursday and Saturday, it will be what they call four balls. And that is, for the layman's term, that is a best ball. And a lot of people will confuse a best ball with a scramble. That's not the same thing. Scramble is what you play on your corporate golf outing. A best ball is each player plays their own golf ball. It's as if they're playing individually. But the best score of the two, the best ball of the two, is that team score. So again, I'll talk about Kitayama and Taylor Montgomery. If they play the first hole, they're a team, and Kitayama makes a 3 and Montgomery makes a 4. The 3 is your team score, and you move on to hole number 2. That will take place, again, best ball format, or 4 balls as they call it, on Thursday and Saturday. And then the formal term is foursomes. We like to call it alternate shot. That's pretty easy to understand. Alternate shot will take place on Friday and Sunday. And what that is, again, Kitayama will tee off, and then Montgomery will hit the approach. Kitayama hits the third shot, and on until the ball is holed. And that is your team score. So 2 little different formats within a different format overall. And I think, we see this in Ryder Cup play as well. And you'll see this week that the best ball rounds taking place on Thursday and Saturday, some guys will be able to go very low on those 2 days. Now, the alternate shot days on Friday and Sunday, you're going to see some guys go over par. And even or just a few strokes under par is going to be a very good round. And, that's part of the handicap as well. If you think about it, alternate shot, you'd love to have a guy that drives it right down the middle every time to set up his partner, who might happen to be a tremendous player on approach. And then let's say the guy who tees off and hits it right down the middle is also a fantastic putter. It's nice to have complementary teammates here. So that's part of the handicap going in as well, knowing how these different formats play within the tournament.
My last question to you is, the gentleman that makes the putt, he sinks the 6-footer to get the birdie par or whatever the score is. In alternate shot, that means the gentleman that didn't putt obviously is driving, correct? The guy that sinks the putt doesn't go and then drive?
I am not positive on that, Jeff. I want to say they may be able to choose who tees off on each hole, but I'm kind of in the camp with you. I don't know that rule for sure, and it's a good question, and it's worth looking up in your handicap. My understanding is right. The guy who putts out, he hits second on the next hole, but I'm not positive. I'll have to look that up after the show, and it's a good question.
All right, the Zurich Classic of New Orleans 2023. The fairway is yours, my friend.
Okay, so I mentioned again, we're going to dumb down the risk. I don't have as many plays this week. And I got a little bit chalky. I talked about this field being very top heavy, and there's a wide gap between the top, maybe 10 groups, and it's not even 10. I mean, you've got the favorites, and you talked about it at the open of the show, Patrick Cantlay and Xander Schauffele as low as 3-1 to win this event. And then your next choice is Colin Morikawa and Max Homa. They're roughly around single digits. You've got Sungjae Im and Keith Mitchell. You got maybe half a dozen, bigger names, guys that rank in the top 75 in the world or what have you. And then it becomes a real crapshoot after that. So out of those bigger names, I landed on Sungjae Im and Keith Mitchell, and I talked about complementary skill sets. Sungjae Im really does everything well. Keith Mitchell is very good, one of the best in the entire world in driving the golf ball. Off the tee, Keith Mitchell is one of the best. And then Sungjae Im with a good short game. He's good on strokes gained approach. Keith Mitchell also makes a ton of birdies. So these guys are a pretty powerful dual force here with their ability to score. So my thinking here a little bit was that if Mitchell can continue to drive that ball perfectly, especially an alternate shot, and set Sungjae Im up for the approach shots, and the back and forth, the alternate shot format for these two gentlemen could work very well. If you look at some of their rankings over the course of the last 36 rounds, Sungjae Im is second in this field for birdies or better gained. And Keith Mitchell is, I think he was like 14th. I'm sorry, I missed it on my notes here. But Sungjae Im also 5th in strokes gained approach. I mentioned he does everything well. Mitchell 3rd in strokes gained off the tee in this field over the last 36 rounds, 24th in greens and regulation gained. And what you're going to find for your most popular distance of par fours on this course is par fours between 450 and 500 yards. And Keith Mitchell ranks 24th in this field on performance of par fours of that length. I got them at 14-1. I've seen them as low as 12-ish, maybe even a little lower out there in some spots, but I felt really good about the number 14, especially when you look at the guys ahead of them, Homa and Morikawa, and then Schauffele and Cantlay being so much lower. And these guys are really not that far off. I mean, Sungjae Im is ranked, I believe, 17th in the world, and Keith Mitchell ranked 50th. So I just felt that these odds were a little bit too inflated versus what the top dogs were getting in this field. Second of all, I went a little further down the board, the aforementioned Kurt Kitayama and Taylor Montgomery, and the complementary nature is not perfect or maybe as pronounced as it might be for Im and Mitchell, but it is a little bit as well. Both of them have really strong short games, and Taylor Montgomery, by the way, this is Team UNLV, a couple guys right here in Las Vegas that live in town, and a couple of running Rebel golfers, Taylor Montgomery and Kurt Kitayama, that played together in college. They both have excellent short games. Taylor Montgomery has arguably the best short game in this entire field and maybe one of the best putters in the world. And you know how it is. We talk about the corporate scramble, or if you go out and you play some sort of tournament where you have a team format with your buddies. If a guy gets hot with the putter, that can really go a long way in a team type setting. So I thought about that for Montgomery. Now, Kitayama has pretty decent numbers in ball striking as well. And obviously you have to be really good in ball striking around Bay Hill, where Kitayama won the Arnold Palmer Invitational back in March. Now, I also believe there's a little bit of a camaraderie factor here. We've seen it, especially with like fellow countrymen. We've seen Australians. We've seen pairs of Australians win here a couple times in the past. We've seen the South Africans pair up and do really well. We've seen Canadians team up and do really well. Outside of the U.S., we've had very good fellow countrymen results. Now here we have college mates. So I think there's a level of trust and a level of comfort that kind of will allow these guys to relax a little bit. And I think that bodes well for possible success here as well. And then my final duo to win outright, and again, I bet these all to win outright and to finish top 20. My last one was Wyndham Clark and Beau Hossler, and I got that at 28-1. When I started thinking about complementary skill sets, this was the very first one that jumped out to me, because Beau Hossler, his entire game basically relies on the short game. Wyndham Clark is an absolute bomber off the tee and can really dial in the irons. So it's almost a perfect setup there for these two. Wyndham Clark, also a very good short game. He's really kind of a unique player, where a bomber off the tee, but also a very deft touch around the greens. So if Clark can work his magic off the tee and Hossler can do so around the greens, this ought to be a very formidable pairing. If you look at some of the numbers here, Wyndham Clark over the last 36 rounds, 31st in this field for strokes gained, or no, this is Hossler, 31st in this field for strokes gained around the green, 34th in strokes gained putting, also 20th in greens and regulation gained. Now, Clark, he is 35th in strokes gained off the tee and 5th on approach. He's also 6th in birdies or better gained. So, I throw out the theory, the complementary nature, the camaraderie with the college mates, and then kind of the complementary skill sets. And these guys made sense. Like I say, I did not go any further down the board and try and pick out a long shot. And there probably are some that will show up. And that's something I think we should mention as well, Jeff, especially in the better ball portion on Thursday and Saturday. Different from a regular PGA Tour event, you're not going to have much volatility in the leaderboard. You're not going to see necessarily a guy make a double or triple bogey and just plummet down the leaderboard because his partner may have just made birdie and that's your team score. So you could have player A struggling mightily, but player B is picking him up left and right. And it looks like this team, did incredibly well and shot 4 under, but meanwhile, player A was, 8 over on the day or something like that. So that can be misleading. And it also, I believe, keeps some of the longer shots in play because, some of these lesser players that are outmatched, if they can ham and egg it, if one guy, if they can trade places, and that's a phrase we use again when you play at your local country club, Bob and Jim, they were able to ham and egg it. One guy plays well on the first hole, the other guy plays well in the second hole. There is that factor here too. And some of these guys that are further down the board, not as good of players as we see at the top of the board, if they can ham and egg it a little bit, they can get away with a double bogey and stuff like that if their partner's picking them up. And that may give them, perceivably at least, a better chance to compete or contend in this championship.
When you were talking about Kitayama and Montgomery, I was having flashbacks to the match play because you had talked about Montgomery on the match play, and I had him to win that round and had him to go far in that match play, up 2-0, and we were all set, I thought, and it was like he mailed in the third round, and then obviously we lost in the playoff there. But the way I remember him, and you talked about him, is one of the best putters in the tour right now. So if his partner there, Kitayama, can take care of, off the tee and the approaches or whatever, and you got someone like Taylor Montgomery heating up with the flat stick, that right there alone sets my wheels saying that there could be a great pairing right there.
Yep, I would agree with you, obviously. No, I do also, like I say, I think kind of the friendship and the trust and the history of playing at UNLV together, they probably are very familiar with each other's games, their tendencies, their comfort zone, and what situations they enjoy. So I think there's a lot of kind of intangibles there between these college mates or good friends that have played together quite a bit, or fellow countrymen. I think you can't necessarily quantify that type of stuff. You can go back and look at past results, and we've seen those people fare well. Now, you can't necessarily put a pen to paper here and take stats to that type of thing. But I do believe it plays into the handicap, and I think to the positive.
My question might be, and I don't talk a lot about in-game, especially during the daily games. I think a lot of people can get over their skis if they're on the wrong side of a game, and then they try to get into an in-game and try to correct it, and usually you end up doubling and tripling your losses. In golf is a whole different ballgame. They tee off on Thursday. There is the pre-flop odds, and say one of the favorites, let's say a John Rahm was a favorite at 9-1. He struggles with a +2 and the leader's only 5. I mean, go back to the Masters. He was 5 back after 36 holes, and you could have still got a nice 3 or 4-1 on Rahm after that. My question is, in a tournament like this, let's say we play these 3 pairs off the pre-flop. Do you yourself take a look after the first round and say maybe a Xander or a Cantlay or a Morikawa and Homa really struggled, and instead of 3-1 or 8-1, they're 4 shots back, but you can get a lot better value? Do you yourself do something like that?
I do, but I probably won't with this particular event.
Okay.
You and I know I did that for the Masters. I think you did too, where I jumped on
Yes.
John Rahm on Friday night at plus 235 because I felt, he was very much in the thick of this. And I've done that certainly on a number of occasions. And I usually don't do it after just the first round, Jeff. I like to see 2 rounds go by and kind of
Okay.
assess at the halfway point where we are and who I might take a stab at. I don't do it certainly every week, but I've probably done it more this year than I have in the past. But for this tournament, unless there's something really juicy looking out there, I probably will not, because again, I go back to the fact that this is a very tough tournament to try and predict. And, whereas we're looking at a normal stroke play event week to week, you can kind of figure, the ebbs and flows.
Sure.
We don't know if it's going to behave the same way this week. So I probably will not look at that at this particular event, even though I do on a regular basis.
This is usually the spot that we talk about first round leaders. We talk about head to head matchups. I don't know, A, if they are offered in this tournament, and B, if so, we do have some of those this week.
Yeah, they are offered for sure. And I took one head-to-head matchup, full tournament head-to-head matchup, and that was Wyndham Clark and Bo Hostler, who I also have an outright on. Took them as a slight underdog at plus 105 over Sahith Theegala and Justin Suh. And Theegala rather, has been playing tremendous golf. He had a great Masters. He really had a good tournament at Harbour Town. And I wonder if he just comes into this a little bit overinflated. I felt like this was going to be a very popular pairing. People have seen how well Theegala has been playing as of late, and I think the price on him has been affected. It's been pounded down when it probably should be a little higher. And so I thought there might be, a little bit too much love for this pairing. It looks like a sexy pairing, but I prefer the Clark and Hostler pairing there, and getting plus money at plus 105. I'm not positive if that's still where it's at, but I would imagine it's probably no worse than even money, maybe a minus 105 at this point, which would still be a play for me. That's my lone head-to-head matchup. And then first round leader, I did go to the top of the board with Colin Morikawa, or just off the top with Colin Morikawa and Max Homa, Team Cal Berkeley in this case. So like my UNLV team, I think these guys will have that camaraderie factor, the friendship, the trust, the comfort, knowing each other's strengths and tendencies. I think that will help here. And you look at some of the numbers, if we're looking at first round leader, Max Homa ranks 10th on tour in first round scoring average, and Morikawa is 14th. They are 20th and 19th, respectively, in bogey avoidance. And over the last 36 rounds, Max Homa is 4th in birdies or better gained, and Morikawa is 7th. So they just light up the stat sheet on the key stats that I look at in terms of first round leader. Make a lot of birdies, don't make bogeys, and what is your first round scoring average? They're about as good as it gets. And then I went back to Sungjae Im and Keith Mitchell as well. I talked about this being a birdie machine team. We kind of went through all of their stats. Sungjae Im is 6th on the PGA Tour in first round scoring average, and Mitchell is 27th. So in addition to, all the props we were giving them, all the accolades we were running down prior when we were looking at the outright market, they're also very good in first round scoring. So I landed on them at 20-1, Morikawa and Homa, by the way, at 14. And then the Canadian team, again, I kind of went back to the pairings where you have that bond. And in this case, fellow countrymen, Canadians, Nick Taylor and Adam Hadwin at 33-1. Both have very good short games, especially Hadwin. This is a little bit similar to the Kitayama-Montgomery pairing, where Montgomery has the extremely strong short game. That's the case with Hadwin. Nick Taylor, a very good short game as well. Hadwin is 35th in this field, by the way, for strokes gained approach. So good in greens and regulation and with the putter. Meanwhile, Nick Taylor, I talked about the par fours from 450 to 500 yards. Taylor at 11th in this field over the last 36 rounds on par fours of that distance. And he's also 24th in first round scoring average, and Adam Hadwin 47th. So not too shabby there by Team Canada. And then finally, also at 33-1, JJ Spawn and Hayden Buckley. And I've seen a lot of sharp players land on these guys in one way or another in a head-to-head matchup or an outright or a top 20. Surprisingly, these are what I would call your maybe above average tour players, not quite journeymen. They haven't been around that long, but above average. They're both ranked in about the 75th neighborhood in the OWGR, the official world golf rankings, both about 75th in the world, which is pretty strong, but not familiar names with everybody out there, casual golf fans and whatnot. But they actually rank very high in first round scoring average, Buckley being 14th and JJ Spawn being 16th. And then at the same time, they really know how to avoid bogeys. Spawn is 9th on tour in that regard, and Buckley 47th. And then they also very much complement each other's skill sets, kind of a reoccurring theme that we've talked about here today. Spawn is 30th in this field over the last 36 rounds for strokes gained around the green, while Buckley is second in this field for strokes gained off the tee. So you love that combination right there. So 4 guys. I think actually all 4 of those teams have a chance to win it outright. Again, you notice I went with more of the marquee stuff in both the first round leader and the outright market. I didn't dive down the board. I mentioned there's a lot of guys in this tournament that don't have a chance to win. I felt like I went with the teams that certainly have a realistic shot.
Amazing work as always, and I can't wait to then go over here when we're done and start clicking the dial here. Next week, where is the tournament?
We are headed to Mexico. We are going out of the country, the Mexico Open at Vedanta. Jon Rahm is your defending champion. And I think last year he was about the same as Cantlay and Xander here. He was like 3 or 4-1. Maybe he was 6-1. He was really short. And sure enough, he lived up to it. I would imagine he'll go back to defend his title. I thought Rahm did a fantastic job. I don't know if you saw him on the commentary. They brought him into the booth for about a half an hour to do some analysis there for Harbor Town. And boy, the guy's got a career after golf whenever he's done with that. But, he talked about how much he loves the game. He's addicted to it. And they were talking to him about time off. When are you going to take a break? And he felt like he was going to take a break for maybe just 3 or 4 days and relax a little bit and get right back after it. So it would not surprise me to see Jon Rahm head to the Mexico Open and try to defend his title. Then after that, Jeff, pardon me, we kind of go. Obviously we had the Masters, and then we had an elevated event at Harbor Town. Now we kind of drop off a little bit in quality of the field. With the Zurich Classic and then also the Mexico Open. I don't expect that to be a star-studded event. But the following week, we go to Quail Hollow Club in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I'm sure that'll be a dandy. And then the next week is the PGA Championship. So that Quail Hollow will kind of be a derby prep race, if you will. I imagine you're going to get a lot of big names there. And then, of course, we go to the PGA Championship, the second major of the season.
I can't wait. You saw the smile. You saw me light up. And there's nothing better than a weekend full of golf. And there's nothing better than Sunday sweats. And with your hard work, expecting to be right there on this Sunday. And we can't thank you enough. As look at Sean Alvarez. Did someone say Derby? Yes, Mr. Alvarez. You will be coming on real
Smooth
soon.
Turn.
Yes, to get us ready, Mr. Smooth, for the Derby. The scroll has been going the whole time, Brady. Everyone watching and listening, please go follow at the Las Vegas Golfer at golf_com, Golf Bet, PGA Tour, on the Sports Grid, I assume later tonight, and of course at Heat Strokes Pod with yourself and Mr. Yeomans. But as I do every week at this time, I turn it over to you so you can tell everyone where to find all your great work.
Well, I think you got it covered there. Of course, my Twitter handle is at Las Vegas Golfer. And then the places where you can find my work written work at golf.com and the PGA Tour at GolfBet. And then, of course, the on-air work at SportsGrid. But thank you for mentioning the podcast. Of course, that was an idea that Matt and I came up with. We've had some guest hosts fill in the past couple days and past couple weeks, I should say, and a really excellent episode this week with Rufus Peabody, maybe the most successful golf bettor, probably the most successful golf bettor I'm certainly aware of, one of the sharpest guys out there. And we did end up on some of the same stuff, but certainly worth checking out. That's at my YouTube channel at Heat Strokes Podcast. It's a lot of fun. I don't know if you've taken a look at that yet, Jeff, but I'd love to hear your opinion. We're just getting off the ground in our third week. We started with the Masters, did another episode for Harbour Town, and just completed our episode for the Zurich Classic on Tuesday. But we review a local golf course and tell some good stories, and then we get into our picks. Only lasts about 30 minutes, and not a real long-winded one, but a good little short and sweet fun one that I think people will enjoy.
And that's on your YouTube channel at Heat Strokes Pod?
Yeah, at Heat Strokes Pod is the Twitter handle associated with the podcast. And if you go to YouTube and just search for Heat Strokes Podcast, you'll find it there as well. You can also get it on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. But for the video and the beautiful pictures of the golf courses and everything we've got going on, all the great graphics that our crew puts together, you'll want to view it on YouTube.
Well, I can guarantee you I will be heading over there. So thank you so much again.
Thank you.
So next week we head to Mexico. No passport needed. We'll have a lot of margaritas and maybe a shot or two of tequila as we break down that. And we'll obviously see if John Rahm will be there to defend as we get closer to heading back for a tune-up before we head to the second major and the PGA, correct?
Absolutely, my friend. I'm looking forward to it. Yeah. The calm before the storm here for the next couple weeks.
Well, we can't wait. So please go follow Brady at the Las Vegas Golfer on Twitter and make sure you check out all his work. Head over to SportsGrid and obviously Heat Strokes Pod. And we will cash some tickets this week, and we will be back same time next week at 6 o'clock. So for myself, Jeff Dawson at EC Sports Invest, Brady Kannon at Las Vegas Golfer, we thank everyone so much for tuning in, and we will see you next week.